Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Body Track webinar. My name is Mike DiBiase. I am a registered dietitian, strength conditioning coach. You can follow me at the Twitter/Gmail account below at designedathlete and designedathlete@gmail.com if you have any further questions. Glad for you all to be in here and check us out. We really do enjoy whenever people are able to attend these webinars and listen in, and we just want to provide you guys with a little bit more information on how to really enhance your sports, your performance, your athleticism, because there's an athlete and a performance artist in all of us, and we just want to help anybody who can get on track better and find that perfect combination of exercise, fitness, health, nutrition, and wellness. And so we're going to be talking today about cardiovascular and endurance training, and especially weight loss. And so if you guys have any questions, again, please feel free to send them in and I can answer them at a later time. Otherwise, we're going to go on with this webinar and to send your questions later, and I'll be glad to answer them. So quickly, why we're going to talk about cardiovascular and weight loss. It tends to be a major factor in America right now. Over 60-some% of us are obese or overweight. And so seeing a lot of weight loss opportunities can help decrease a lot of risk and comorbidities that are associated with some of the major factors that play into death, heart attack, stroke, congestive heart disease, diabetes. So being able to maintain our weight in an appropriate area and being able to apply good opportunities and good ways to maintain our weight and improve our fitness at the same time can only benefit us for the long run and, of course, in the immediate effects of just feeling good. So why do we train? The whole idea of cardio training and endurance training, and that does not necessarily just mean being on a treadmill or being on an elliptical. It means moving through space and time for consistently long periods of time and getting that heart rate up to be a consistent pattern to push blood and fluid through the system and get that heart rate pumping at a pace we don't normally get and keep it there for a longer period of time. So we want to optimize our performance enhancement. We want to optimize weight loss, the ability for us to lose weight, lose fat mass specifically, and maintain or gain lean body mass, muscle. Our body composition changes, so losing fat, maintaining or gaining muscle at the same time, or as best of a ratio as we can. Just the overall health benefits, again, preventing disease, improving our overall enjoyment of life and increasing our activities of daily living, and just for the enjoyment of moving and maybe just de-stressing after a long day. So if we're going to work that hard to push our body through time and space, have small minor breakdowns in our muscle to have to rebuild them, it only makes sense to have to eat appropriately and feed and fuel these muscles appropriately so there's constant regeneration, constant recovery, so we can go back and do the thing that we enjoy and what we want to optimize. So some physiological responses to training. Increased lactate threshold. We won't talk much on this, but basically, can we push our bodies further to the point where we start feeling that burning sensation, which starts to slow down our muscle activity? And then once we get to a point where we can't go any longer, that's kind of our lactate threshold. So can we push that further downstream where we can go a little bit harder and a little bit longer before we get to that wall, before we get to that burning feeling and that cessation of movement? Increased breakdown and transport of fatty acids and intramuscular triglycerides, so basically fat inside the muscles, which are IMTG, and fatty acids. So the more we can actually break down the fats and lipids and transport them through the system, the more energy we can utilize from them, because remember, fats have 9 calories per gram, where carbohydrates and proteins have 4 each respectively. So if we can increase that breakdown, we can burn more fat and utilize more fat for energy. Increase number and density of capillaries. So basically, if we can increase the number, the thickness, the volume of the capillaries in our appendages, we can deliver more substrates, more energy delivering pieces and particles and molecules, more blood, more fluid, more oxygen. So that means we can go a little bit harder, a little bit longer. So we're just supplying basically more tunnels to our system so we can push through more cars into the city. The city is our body, more cars are the fuel, more subways are the capillaries. The more cars fill the cities, improve the city as itself, improve the body. So we want to increase those numbers, and the physiological response from cardio training can actually increase these. Increase mitochondrial density. Mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. So if we can actually improve and increase the number of mitochondria through cardio training, we can increase energy from the cell as well, and make specific proteins from cardio training through increased mitochondrial density. Plasma volume and left ventricle size. So increased plasma volume, basically fluid inside also the blood, and left ventricle size, so increasing the ability to push out blood from the heart. Cardiac output, heart rate times stroke volume. So the heart rate may decrease because of good cardiovascular ability, but stroke volume will increase. So if we can increase stroke volume, essentially more blood ejected, especially from the left ventricle, we can see greater cardiac output. So that means more blood through the system, more oxygen, more substrates, more energy. Increased ligament and tendon strength. If we have weak ligaments and tendons, we can't move our body appropriately, which can lead to dramatic injury and time off from actually working out. ATP, phosphocreatine, and glycogen stores, decreased resting heart rate, like I just said, and decreased fat mass and or weight loss. So endurance training, cardio training through weights, through running, through endurance running, ellipticals, steppers, those kind of things. Huge benefits just to our overall health. So there's no reason to not be doing this. It's a quick little study in a picture. If you look at the top, increased dietary protein and combined. So this is just why we talk about nutrition and fitness at the same time. You can't have one without the other. Dietary protein and combined high intensity aerobic with resistance exercise. So this is basically saying there's 3 parts to this study. The dark lines with the black circles are the control. The dark lines with the squares are the traditional diet. So basically what the traditional American diet, usually higher in fat, higher in carbohydrates, lower in protein, and cardiovascular training only. And then the dark line with the triangles was resistance training along with cardio training and a balanced diet, maybe a little bit more reduced carbohydrates and fats, or better modification of proper fats and proper carbohydrates and increased protein. If you look across the board, you'll see that the triangles saw the greatest change in body weight. They lost the most kilograms in body weight, which is approximately 5.5 kilograms. So you're looking at anywhere between 11 to 13 pounds of body weight lost because they combined a balanced diet, cardio training, and resistance training, as compared to just the team or the group that just did cardio training and maintained their diet, and the control group, which probably changed nothing. So adding all of these things, resistance training, cardio training, and a more improved diet, saw the greatest results. So why wouldn't we incorporate these ideals? Ways to decrease fat storage. So looking at burning fat. One, we can certainly absorb and take in fewer calories than we burn. So less in, more out. So we're always in a negative energy balance, which will force our body to have to modify and potentially lose weight. Keep blood sugar levels low to moderate so we don't see any spikes. When we keep blood sugar levels low and we keep them moderate, keep a nice ebb and flow rather than peaks and troughs, we see greater burn or fat burn and fat utilization. Whereas when we see large blood sugar spikes, that means insulin usually has to come surging in to bring the spike down. Insulin also helps store fat. So we don't want to store it, we want to use it. So if we keep blood sugar low, we potentially have the ability to utilize more fat as a substrate and energy source rather than storing it. So that also means eating at regular intervals, eating less, reducing carbohydrates, a whole combination of things. Ways to increase the fat you burn, increase overall calories we burn each day. So if that means we're going to work out 45 minutes, maybe we go to an hour the next week. Take those extra 15 minutes and put it to good use. Increase the use of fat as a fuel. So working out at an intensity that allows fat to be utilized at a greater percentage, or using higher intensity interval style training. Some people call it HIIT, where fat may be a smaller percentage, but there will be more fat burned overall in magnitude due to the high intensity of it. So many ways to do it. We either decrease the storage and or increase the burnage. So to start talking about supplements, we need to just address that we do not endorse any specific supplement, any specific brand. We just advocate, at least us as registered dietitians, advocate the importance and necessity of supplements when they are necessary. Not every supplement is necessary. You can certainly get a lot of these ingredients from foods that we eat every day. But for those of us who want to try supplements, it's best to have the most informed pieces, research, evidence-based data, so you can make the most informed decision for yourself. So again, we're not endorsing anything, but we do want to provide you the most up-to-date information as possible so you can make the most informed decision whether or not you want to try it or have to modify what you're doing already. So can we boost, enhance, add, or modify training with specific supplements? And specific supplements that we're going to talk about today that have had some really good effect on weight loss and cardio have been caffeine, green tea, and sometimes, surprisingly for some people, protein. Some people automatically assume protein as muscle building, whereas yes, the muscles are predominantly made of water and protein, but you'll see through some of the research that protein has a great impact on cardio training, endurance training, and weight loss. All of these can be considered on how you use them as an ergogenic supplement. So these are defined as ingredients that have been shown to significantly enhance exercise performance using evidence-based research, which is what we always try to use as professionals in the nutrition and fitness field. It may not directly apply to you, but nutrition is an art and a science in itself. So some people get it, some people use it, some people don't understand it, or it doesn't necessarily work for them, and we'd have to make modifications. It's all personal. Help athletes to stay injury-free and or healthy during intense training, yielding an indirect improvement in performance. Adding enhanced nutritional practices and choices that can ultimately improve performance and recovery should be considered ergogenic as well. So just because something's ergogenic doesn't make it a supplement. Ergogenic can mean essentially how are we going to enhance exercise performance. So there's many things that can be considered ergogenic, and some of them aren't even consumable. They may be a type of fitness equipment or modality or a way of training that will enhance performance or enhancement or recovery. But for today, we're going to talk about a few supplements as ergogenic aids. Caffeine. It is the most widely consumed drug, and yes, it is considered a drug in the world. We call it caffeine. Scientifically, it's called methylxanthine. We'll call it caffeine today, as always. You can find it in a plethora of different drugs, drinks, beverages, smoothies, shakes, foods, and even proprietary blends, which unfortunately we just don't know what are in them because most proprietary blends are covered under that particular company's right to keep that private, and it's part of their secret formula to not give away their specific information so they can keep maybe a patent on it, or that's what delineates them as that specific company with that specific formula. So sometimes when we see proprietary blends, we see caffeine up there. or ma huang or bitter orange or other variations of stimulants. We just don't know how much caffeine. It could be very little or it could be disastrously large amounts. And that's just unfortunate. We just don't know. So there's some things to take into consideration if we're buying supplements over the counter or at these general supplement stores. Then we mostly get caffeine from coffees, cocoa seeds, teas, soft drinks, pop, sodas, and the like. But some of us do take caffeine pills, and sometimes it's even in nasal decongestants, medication that we take for colds and sinuses, and a few other things that maybe we just don't consider throughout the day that we just may be getting a routine caffeine fix. One of the great things about caffeine is it does empty quickly from the stomach, so we do feel its effects for those of us who are caffeine sensitive, probably within 15 to 45 minutes. And we do see through some research that the max concentration in the system is at about around 45 minutes after consumption. This is a quick chart to show you the amount of caffeine, and again, this varies depending on the company, depending on the actual ingredients, the dates of purchase, and all that stuff. So on average, coffee, generically brewed stuff, maybe we do at home, approximately 200 milligrams in a 12-ounce cup. Tea, 80, I've seen as low as 50, I've seen as high as 100 plus. Coke and Pepsi, you can usually see on the ingredient list anywhere between 35 to 38 sometimes. 5-Hour Energy, Red Lion, ready to drink. You can see that some of these just have, even in a 2-ounce shot, which is 6 times less than the tea or the Coke or Pepsi, has up to 4 or 5 times as much caffeine just in a 2-ounce shot. So that's one thing to be cognizant of if we are consuming a 5-Hour Energy. 8 ounces in a Rockstar is 80, Red Line 250. So 2 drinks, one is 3 times the amount of caffeine in one compared to the other. So things definitely to take into consideration when we're trying to find, or if we're trying to find a caffeine or a stimulant. We have to remember that caffeine is not energy. When we say, oh, I've taken a lot of caffeine, I have a lot of energy, that is false. We get energy from carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, from calories, because calories get burned to produce ATP, which then turns to energy. Caffeine is a central nervous stimulant, so it may feel like energy, but when we say, what we really should be saying is, oh, I just took some caffeine, I am stimulated, or my central nervous system has been stimulated. That is still a very good ergogenic enhancement aid, because we will sense central nervous system fatigue before we sense muscle fatigue. When we start lifting heavy, or we start going hard on the treadmill or running or back and forth doing shuttle runs or push-ups or burpees, we start to get that fog in our head, breathing. Our visualization sometimes changes, just our perception and awareness around, and we lose focus of what we're doing because we start to get tired. That central nervous stimulation over a long period of time gets fatigued a lot quicker than muscle stimulation. So if we can enhance the CNS and reduce fatigue, we can potentially keep that central nervous stimulated a little bit longer, which then means we can potentially push forward through our workouts a little bit longer before our muscles fatigue. A little bit longer, more volume, more intensity, more means potentially more calories burned, potentially also means greater weight loss. So just also take into consideration, when we talk about supplements, we don't ingest a supplement and then something happens. We don't ingest caffeine and literally watch fat melt off us. We don't ingest protein and watch fat melt off us. You have to put in the work for these supplements to work. So for these things to actually take into effect and have the greatest opportunity to have that optimal enhancement and performance, we have to do our due diligence to make sure we're providing the environment for these supplements to succeed. So that means putting in the effort in the gym, in the studio, working out, and performing the appropriate exercises, duration and volume and intensity to make sure that caffeine has its ability to actually work. Caffeine has shown in studies to increase resting energy expenditure, but on a short-term basis, not over the long term, over the course of weeks, but maybe in a few hours or in a day's term, for about 7 to 15%. And you're looking at a 100 to 400 milligram dose. So again, 6 to 8 ounces of coffee, half a caffeine pill potentially, but that 7 to 15% could make a dramatic change in the way we work out, maybe by pushing us just a few more minutes longer during that workout. And those few minutes could lead to greater calorie burnage, and over the course of weeks and months and years, that takes into account and exponentially grows and grows to potentially see some greater weight loss. There haven't been long-term studies to conclusively demonstrate body composition and body weight, just because there are mitigating factors. People move, people's diets change, workouts become stagnant, they plateau. So we do need to see better or longer term studies with caffeine. There are responders and non-responders to caffeine. Some people can drink a cup of coffee and be completely wired and awake. Other people can drink a cup of coffee at 9 p.m. and go right to sleep. So you just have to figure out, are you caffeine sensitive or not sensitive? For those who are sensitive, could be a good thing, but drinking too much or consuming too much caffeine can create great amount of jitters, anxiousness, high heart rate, and that can actually depress performance. So there is kind of a bell curve with the right amount of caffeine consumption and whether or not you're that sensitive to it. Overly sensitive or not sensitive at all to caffeine consumption. There are variations in genetics, so you kind of just have to play around with whether or not you are sensitive to caffeine. Some people are more sensitive to pills over caffeine, HCl, which is usually just the main form, and then caffeine and coffee. But we do need larger sample pools for better statistical significance. Caffeine in food. If we're taking caffeine by itself, so whether it's in pill form, powder form, most of us usually take caffeine through coffee or tea or some type of beverage, but we'll just use coffee as itself. Black coffee, we see greater absorption and utilization of the caffeine when it's left in its most basic state without any interfering substrates. So like carbohydrates, sugars, proteins, fats. Once we start adding those substrates, extra sugar, whipped cream, milk, heavy cream, half and half, protein, we actually see a decrease in the utilization and absorption of the caffeine. And it varies, but on average, we look at maybe about a fifth reduction, 20% reduction with that concomitant intake, especially of carbohydrates. Because again, when we increase the carbohydrates, insulin comes in, it's a fat storage, but carbohydrate with the intake of caffeine, we do see about a 20% reduction in that availability. So if we're looking for a caffeine fix and we want the best utilization of caffeine, drinking it black or taking it as is the best opportunity. If we're taking it with sugars and carbohydrates and all the other fixings that we get at some of these major coffee shops, we may be losing out on a lot of that caffeine availability, which is why some of these coffee shops put in hundreds of grams of caffeine to kind of compensate for the hundreds of grams of carbohydrates they add. So if you're looking for a milkshake, get a milkshake. But if you're looking for a caffeine fix, drink it black. Cognizant of commercialized coffee drinks. So I'm not saying never go to a commercial coffee barista or store. But what we are saying is those variations in the caffeine that you get happen all the time. Humidity changes the amount of coffee because the humidity affects the coffee bean itself. How long was that coffee pressed, steamed, ground? The person brewing it, did they brew it at the exact temperature of the previous person or the next person? How hot was the water that pulled the juices and extracts from the beans? Was it cooler than usual? Was it hotter than usual? The size of the grind. The bigger the grind, the less it can extract. The smaller the grind, the less there is to extract. How old were those beans when they came into the store? Were they stored it properly? And the amount of water used. So these all variations make huge changes in coffee. You can get a cup of coffee at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday and it have X amount of caffeine, and then you could get coffee the same store at 4 p.m. and it could have a completely different amount of caffeine in there, just because of all of these variations and variables. So don't automatically assume what it says is going to be on that label. There's a lot of things that change in these drinks. So if you're just looking, you know you want caffeine, brew it yourself. You know the scoops amount, you know the water amount, you know how long the thing heats it for. That's your best bet. Caffeine increases fat oxidation and decrease carbohydrate oxidation. So when we ingest caffeine, we actually see a slight percentage increase in fat breakdown. So there's fat lipolysis, where the fatty acids cleave off the glycerol backbone and are now free fatty acids in the bloodstream. And those free fatty acids can enter cells, enter the mitochondria, and be used, cleaved 2 carbons at a time. And that is called fat oxidation. That's when we actually use the fat as energy. Caffeine has actually seen in some research to enhance this fat oxidation property. So this is where we may see caffeine intake help with fat loss. Increased movement of the free fatty acids, again, from the adipose tissue. So it's from fat tissue, the cleaving of the fatty acids, the triglycerides, the 3 fatty acids from the glycerol backbone, and then move freely from the reservoirs into the bloodstream for utilization. We have seen caffeine with a greater effect on younger people and people who have experienced training, because they just become more efficient in their utilization and substrate utilization. So caffeine certainly has a greater effect on younger people, whereas older people, we see a more blunted response. So that means there may have to be greater caffeine consumption, but that also gets into the point of, is this too much caffeine for this person? And is there a diminished return where now we're just getting too jittery because we've just had too much caffeine and we're not going to get the positive results? So more research needs to be done on older people and caffeine consumption. It also may reduce rate of perceived exertion. So with that central nervous stimulation, we get a heightened sense of awareness too. There has been some research that showed there has been a decrease in pain receptors. So pain receptors in the sense that every time our foot strikes the ground and we build up that lactate and we're lifting and our muscles are feeling strained because of the weight or the amount of reps, the way we perceive that exertion may be a slightly decreased because of that caffeine consumption. So, which means we may be able to push ourselves a little bit harder or a little bit longer because we don't necessarily feel as agonizing as we normally would if we weren't taking caffeine. So there is potential for that decreased rate of perceived exertion. 0 being no pain, no exertion, I'm good to go. I'm basically sitting here doing nothing. 10 being I could not do one more rep, one more step. I'm at my absolute max. And so being able to decrease, going from 10 to 9, 9 to 8, and down the line, means that we can potentially push harder and longer because we don't perceive that exertion to our max yet. Ephedra and caffeine combinations have been highly touted. Ephedra is still illegal, but there are alkaloids that are not illegal based on the amount of milligrams allotted. But just for information's sake, the caffeine and ephedra combination has been touted as a very good weight loss supplement. But again, we don't advocate taking an illegal substance. Heart rate, systolic blood pressure, and kcals, you can see with the placebo in dark bluish purple, and then caffeine ephedra in the light purple, blue, whatever color that is. You can see that in the placebo and for heart rate was much lower than the caffeine ephedra. So increasing or intaking caffeine and ephedra, we did see a greater change in heart rate. So heart rate did increase. could be a good thing, but we also want to be very careful with people with congenital heart disease, any heart disease in the family, previous heart attacks, anything like that, where we may not want to see that type of dramatic change. But with an increase in heart rate, there may potentially come an increase in cardiac output as well, so more oxygen and more blood to the system. Systolic blood pressure changes, but kcals utilized per minute also changes, and almost essentially doubles. So there are some negatives, there are some positives, but again, we don't advocate taking an illegal substance. One study, International Journal of Sports Medicine, 97. It's an older study, but it's still a nice one. Caffeine consumed in a carb electrolyte beverage during moderate endurance exercise does not compromise body hydration status. So there's been a lot of talk, and then you're going to see the other one. There's little evidence to suggest that the use of beverages containing caffeine during non-exercise might hinder hydration status. Basically, what they're saying is caffeine does not dehydrate you. There has been very little evidence to suggest that taking caffeine is going to cause you to become dehydrated or going to cause you to constantly go to the bathroom. If you woke up after an 8-hour sleep and decided just to drink hot water, and more than likely you would, and drink it relatively quickly, more than likely you would probably still have to go to the bathroom because you just drank a lot of hot water, which stimulates gastric movement and intestinal movement. You've been fasting and being dehydrated for 8 hours during sleep. So pretty much any hot beverage may cause you to go to the bathroom. So caffeine, a lot of studies have shown that it does not cause dehydration and does not force you to have to go to the bathroom any more or less than any other hot beverage after 8 hours of not drinking anything. In 2005, this isn't that recent, but they did a lot of research, especially in armed forces and military. They saw that observation and reconnaissance tasks were maintained in the caffeine group, but decreased in the placebo group. So caffeine may have a great effect on some of these soldiers who are awake for 27 hours, battling through different environments, extreme environments, very stressful situations. So if there's one thing that military forces and armed force men and women need to do is be able to look at very small details and make very quick, necessary life-saving decisions sometimes. And caffeine has helped some of those observate OR tasks where those may have been very important to the mission and to potentially their survival. So not making a cause and effect that with increased caffeine sees greater life-saving potential, but in some of those tasks that may eventually lead to some, life-saving opportunity or, surviving the mission, caffeine in these studies have shown a great maintenance of those tasks during those extreme wakefulness. So in summary, caffeine can increase energy expenditure, so energy out, increase free fatty acid circulation, so hopefully we can increase utilization of the fat we have stored, so we can oxidize it and use it as energy and burn it. Greater central nervous stimulation, so we can see greater and longer central CNS time and decrease CNS fatigue, which then means hopefully less muscle fatigue, which means we can hopefully go a little bit longer and harder. Potential glycogen sparing. So if we don't have to necessarily utilize or store muscle glycogen and we can use caffeine as a central nervous stimulant because we're utilizing more fat, we can have that sparing effect when we need that glycogen at the very end. The amount necessary, again, we're looking at general across the board for the average person, and we're looking at about 3 to 4 cups is 200 to 300 milligrams. That may be a lot for some people because some people are made sensitive more than others, but on average, 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram is a good way to start, and most people suggest starting at 3 milligrams per kilogram. So if you're a 135-pound individual, that's about 61 kilograms. Multiply that out, 3 times 61 is about 180. So about 180 milligrams. And if you can look at how many milligrams are in your coffee, That's anywhere between 1.5 to 2.5 cups of coffee, which really isn't a lot. Some of us consume a lot more than that. So starting off there, see if there's any benefit, and then maybe if there isn't, going up to 4 or 5. 6 is really the max, because after 6 we start seeing in a lot of people anxiety, restlessness, jitteriness, headaches, heart palpitations that just overall make them feel terrible and decrease performance as is. And if we're going to do that, black coffee or caffeine anhydrous as itself 30 to 45 minutes before exercise, so we get the greatest concentration. So green tea from the Camellia sinensis plant, prepared mostly as a beverage. Most of us don't eat tea leaves or extract them ourselves, so we're going to steep them and diffuse them into our hot water or cool water. In Asian cultures, it's been used as medicines. Pretty much the entire Asian culture uses tea. It's still the most widely drunk beverage in the world. So tea across nations and across time has shown major benefits for health, mental awareness, acuity, reducing stress, and its ergogenic effects in performance as well. And really, it's ease of consumption. There are teas out there that are just delicious, that people just enjoy on a very daily basis, just for ease and relaxation as well. So it can go from one end of the spectrum to another. Green tea, especially, which is what we're going to be talking about, act as an antioxidant and anti-carcinogenic, so prevention of cancer and removal and prevention of oxidative free radicals, which basically destroy our cells. They are free oxygen particles that attach to other molecules and break them down, other atoms, and break them down. So this antioxidant property of green tea helps protect those cells and remove those oxidative free radicals. The active ingredient is EGCG, epigallocatechin gallate. We're just going to say EGCG just because it's so much easier. The action of EGCG, it inhibits catecholomethyltransferase, so COMT, which is through research and through cellular activity responsible for norepinephrine degradation. Like caffeine, there are some side effects with green tea. So we said caffeine, increased or high amounts of green tea or caffeine. We can see jitteriness, nausea, vomiting, potentially insomnia as well. So lack of sleep and therefore decreased performance. So there are some side effects to increasing too much caffeine. Green tea, just like with coffee, the brewing process, the who, what, the when, the where, and the why of the brewing. If we're going to do it, if it's going to be brewed, then we should be brewing it if we wanted to use it as an ergogenic aid. Because we know how much water's going into it. We know how much tea leaves or the tea bag that's being placed. We know the temperature, and we can adjust accordingly based on what we need and what we want at the time. Too much green tea can cause irritability, so like the high doses of caffeine, headaches, nervousness, and that kind of stuff. But also, we've seen some research that green tea can potentially decrease the bioavailability of iron. So for women who are menstruating, younger women, and vegetarians who don't consume high amounts of iron, but do consume a large amount of green tea, this potentially could be an issue, decreasing that bioavailability, because we know iron has oxygen carrying capacity. So if we can increase and maintain those iron stores, we can maintain the hemoglobin stores, which helps transfer oxygen to the cells and muscles for utilization and through the blood. If we are in a situation where we have low iron and we're consuming extreme amounts of green tea extract through brewing process, through drinks, it may decrease the bioavailability of any iron consumed or utilized. So that just puts us even more of a detriment to being iron deficient. So one thing you should potentially get checked is always do blood work to make sure that you have sufficient amounts of iron in you. And then also always just talk to your doctor about green tea and its connection with iron. And are you consuming too much? But again, there is potential for it. Not saying there is for you, but there is potential. In 1999, an older study, but EGCG produced significant increase in energy expenditure, 4%. So significant, 4%. That may not be significant in the weight room, but in the study it was significant. And burning of fat, so oxidation property, 10% versus the placebo. And then again in 2000, the combination of EGCG and caffeine was better than caffeine alone. They saw a synergistic property of combining the active ingredient EGCG from green tea and caffeine was better than just the caffeine alone. So one option may be to take caffeine and EGCG supplements together to see a greater effect in fat lipolysis and potentially fat oxidation as well. One study titled Body Weight Loss and Weight Maintenance in Relation to Habitual Caffeine Intake and Green Tea Supplementation. So in this study, the investigation of the green tea and caffeine mixture and its effect on the people's weight maintenance after the body weight loss in moderately obese subjects in relation to habitual caffeine intake. So when they did a randomized controlled trial, parallel 76 overweight subjects, and they were all matched. They consumed a low energy diet intervention for 4 months and then a 3-month weight management diet. So during the weight management period, they were giving the green tea and caffeine mixture, which was 270 milligrams of EGCG and 150 milligrams of caffeine a day, or a placebo. So the results were the subjects lost 6 plus or minus about 2 kilograms of body weight. The high caffeine consumers reduced weight, fat mass, and waist circumference more than the low caffeine consumers. The resting energy expenditure was reduced less, and the rate quotient was reduced. So rate quotient we won't get too much into, but the lower the rate quotient, the more fat we burn. The higher the rate quotient, the more carbohydrate. So it goes on a 1.00 to 0.7 scale. So the closer to 0.7 on the respiratory quotient, closer to 0.7 we burn more fat. Closer to 1.00 we burn more carbohydrates. During the weight management, the low caffeine consumers still reduced body weight, waist circumference, respiratory quotient, and body fat. But the high caffeine consumers saw no change during the weight management process. So there are things to take away from this. There may have been responders and non-responders in the groups which haven't been accounted for, and the naive consumers versus the truly habitual consumers. So people who have been doing this for a long time and people who think they've been doing this for a long time or have just started and maybe not have consumed as much as the habitual users before. So more studies definitely need to be done, but there has been some promising looks at the combination of EGCG and caffeine as a good or potentially promising weight loss ergogenic aid. Its summary: as a supplement, looking for a standardized amount of EGCG is a good way to start out. So that's about 270 milligram dose 3 times a day. So you're looking at about 750 milligrams per day total. It's not difficult to find an EGCG supplement. You can find it in a lot of stores or on online stores. But for most of us, it just may be the consumption of green tea. Now, of course, there isn't nearly as much green or EGCG in green tea. As you can see, 1 cup of green tea can be 40 to 80, which is 4 to 7 times or 3 to 7 times less than an EGCG supplementation. And to get that amount, you'd have to drink 10 to almost 20 cups a day of green tea. And is that even realistic? And again, green tea may have some effects on the reduced iron availability. So if we're consuming that much, we're already iron deficient. Could this lead to more issues? There has been promising research on metabolic rate and increase in that resting energy rate, at least acutely and in short term. But overall, more research is needed to say pretty conclusively green tea is a good ergogenic aid. Should we still potentially consume green tea, assuming all things are equal and we're healthy? Why not? It has great antioxidant, anti-carcinogenic properties. It makes us feel good. It puts us in a good mental state. With caffeine that is in some of the green teas, or adding caffeine and the EGCG, we may see a greater fat lipolysis and fat oxidation effect, maybe a greater resting energy rate or energy expenditure. So we may still see some really good benefits just from a little bit consuming every day. It is a non-caloric beverage as long as we don't add great amounts of sugar and honey and all this other stuff that we need to put into it. So there are some benefits just to consuming green tea as is without having to add all the other ergogenic aids to it. So if you're considering it, look at your overall health, look if it's a feasible option, and potentially try it. And the last thing, proteins. So total protein needs really vary greatly. The AM, the ADRI, or the MDRI for protein is about 0.8 grams per kilogram to maintain muscle mass. We've all seen that before. So, for 135 pounds, 61 kilogram person, that's about 4/5 of 61 kilograms. So you're probably looking at about 50 plus or minus a few grams here and there per day just to maintain. But we are active individuals. We exercise, we move, we use our muscles. So that means we have to fuel our muscles with more protein. So that can vary greatly between 50 to 175% in athletes. And again, there's always an athlete in us. We just have to find that performance level. So there has been a lot of research on the different types and availabilities of proteins, like milk, which is whey and casein, plant-based proteins like wheat and soy and egg proteins. Protein quality is determined through many factors. We're not going to get into that, but a few things we want to hit on is 20 amino acids, 9 are essential, which mean the EAAs. So we need to consume those 9 essential in our diet because our body cannot produce them. The other 11 our body can. That's why they're called non-essential amino acids. But do not confuse the term non-essential with not necessary. That is far from the truth. We can utilize some of these non-essentials to produce a lot of these other variations and other hormones and enzymes in our body that we absolutely need. So non-essential just means our body can produce them. Does not mean they're not necessary. All 20 are necessary. Protein quality is defined as its capacity to provide the essential amino acids. So the greater protein quality, the greater amount of the 9 essential amino acids and composition are in that particular product or food item. The EAAs alone, the essential 9 amino acids, have been shown through some research that they can stimulate protein synthesis just as a whole protein that has the same amount of EAAs. So consuming those EAAs or consuming a food that also just has those EAAs and the other proteins have been shown to have similar protein synthesis. But again, that does not mean we don't need the other 11. We do. So the EAAs at the top, the branched chain amino acids, so leucine, isoleucine, and valine, methionine, lysine, phenylalanine, threonine, and tryptophan. So those are the 9 EAAs. The quality of the protein choice is definitely something to take into consideration if you're looking at specific proteins or consuming specific proteins. It is determined by the essential amino acid content, and we consider after that whether it's complete or incomplete. So complete means it has all 9, all 3 BCAAs and the other 5 or 6 essential amino acids. So The complete ones tend to be of animal origin, dairy, eggs, meat, fish, and the like. And incomplete proteins tend to be grains, vegetables, and fruit, which means it may be missing 1, 2, or 3 of the essential amino acids. Soy would be considered a complete protein, but it is lower in composition in some of the other essential amino acids. So it may not have necessary amounts of some of them, but some people do consider soy as a complete protein. Supplements, well, going back to incomplete, so to create complete proteins, if you aren't going to consume dairy, eggs, meat, or fish, if you're going to just consume plants, vegetables, fruits, and the like, is to consume combinations of them, combinations of grains, of seeds, of nuts, fruits, and vegetables. So we do make complete proteins. If one grain is void of one EAA and another grain has that EAA, then combining them together in a meal, making that combination, those complementary proteins, would make a complete protein then. And that's one thing we try to advocate to vegetarians, vegans, lacto-ovo vegetarians, fruitarians, anyone who doesn't consume meats or derivatives of meats like dairy and eggs and the such, to make those complete proteins so we do get those essential amino acids into the system. So a few supplements are like whey, casein, milk and egg proteins tend to be of highest quality because of the complete proteins. Whey is faster in absorption than casein, but over the long term in research, we have seen similar increases in protein synthesis, protein accretion and creation based on whey and casein. So sometimes timing is the main factor. Sometimes overall length of time of start to finish is a factor. But we do know that whey has a greatest absorption rate, which means it can get into the bloodstream and into the system quicker than casein. Milk proteins, consuming milk or milk products, we have seen through research has sped recovery greater than some soy and plant-based products, because of the high leucine content and the whey and casein content of milk, decreased muscle damage, increased glycogen replenishment, so protein can help maintain that glycogen storage and help replenish it and store it again after utilization. Improved hydration status. With increased protein comes increased water retention as well, so we can see better hyperhydration or hydration status because of protein. Milk is broken down into its general protein, which are casein and whey. And we're going to talk just briefly about both fractions of its proteins. So in casein on the left, 9.3% leucine. And the reason why I'm bringing up leucine is it tends to be looked into research, especially recently in the last 5 to 6 years, one of the major, if not the major, contributing amino acid for muscle protein synthesis. So a lot of research now is coming out to show how impactful leucine and leucine supplementation can be with muscle protein synthesis and accretion and utilization. So you expect to see more research coming out with leucine. Casein, water insoluble, and it coagulates in the gut, which is why it gets digested a lot slower. So sometimes people call casein nighttime protein, where they'll take casein protein at night, whey protein during the day. Because if casein protein has a slower digestion, that means there's a higher rate of protein in the blood for a longer period of time. Because it's getting digested slower and absorbed slower over a longer period. Whey protein has 11% leucine, so it has more of the branched chain amino acid that has muscle protein building ability, which is why a lot more research is being done on casein because of its higher leucine content and percentage. Whey protein is water soluble, though. It can mix easily in protein or in water. It does dissolve and it's rapidly ingested. So that's why more people take whey protein during the day, so it can get into the system quicker to help recover and rebuild during the day when we're still moving. Research with whey has shown greater stimulation muscle protein synthesis at rest, which basically means not working out, and after exercise than casein. But like we said before, over the long period of time, there are similar advantages with casein and whey in protein synthesis. But there may be greater stimulation of protein at rest and exercise, or at least immediately following exercise with whey than casein. Meat versus plant-based. One key difference with vegetarian diets, they tend to have a lower amount of protein just because vegetables, fruits, nuts, seeds, and plants tend to have just lower protein content. So that means they either need to consume a lot more food overall to get that protein, or supplement with protein that is vegetarian and vegan approved, plant-based, or follow their particular diet and culture that they want to be a part of. But one thing, again, with vegetarian and vegan diets, since they are low in protein, they tend to also have low leucine levels and lower abilities to gain more muscle mass, lower opportunities to maybe keep higher hydration status, lower opportunities to maintain glycogen replenishment. So we do want to encourage vegetarian and vegan and people who follow a vegetarian lifestyle and a vegan lifestyle, or any other type of lifestyle that removes animal proteins, to supplement accordingly or make those necessary complete proteins through those combinations of complementary proteins, different grains, different legumes, beans, fruits, and nuts at each meal. So we're getting those necessary levels of protein in our system. Soy is considered a lower quality complete protein. Milk protein, we've seen, increases lean mass and decreased fat mass more than soy. So not saying that soy doesn't do it. We've just seen milk proteins have a greater effect in increasing muscle, increasing lean mass, and helping to decrease fat mass. And that also may come with the satiety of milk with the fat and the complete proteins. So slower digestion, increased fat mass, or increased lean body mass, decreased fat mass, and potentially increased resting energy rate as well, with the consumption of milk and, of course, the exercise over a long period of time. The optimal protein distribution. The synthesis peaks around 45 to 90 minutes following a meal, but in order to why we want to raise protein synthesis is through the leucine content. And getting in at about 2 to 3 grams of leucine may show that we hit a mark. Some research shows that hitting about 3 grams of leucine hits a mark that finally starts the protein synthesis turnover, where we can finally see some muscle building ability, and increased muscle, increased lean muscle tissue, increased resting energy rate, increased energy expenditure, hopefully decreased fat mass as well. This one quick study, the PRIZE study, Paul Arciero, Bauer, and Dr. Michael Ormsby. This was in 2014, 20 grams of whey protein 3 times a day added to a habitual diet for overweight, obese men and women. And if we just quickly go back, you can see in PRIZE, whether just protein plus resistance training, or protein, PRIZE stands for protein resistance training, interval, stretching, and endurance. So it was a workout system that was created. You can see that with the protein, with the different types of workouts, they saw the greatest percentage of fat mass loss and the greatest increase in muscle change. So they saw greater muscle accruement and greater fat loss with protein, with resistance training, with other exercise modalities. So here's the International Science of Sports Nutrition's position stand on protein. I won't read it off for you, but you can pause it and read it yourself. But they're going through much research and creating like a meta-analysis description of their stand on how protein affects the body and how much, and the kind of the who, what, when, where, why of protein. So in general, caffeine, it's a central nervous stimulant. It can increase resting energy rate, resting energy expenditure, and it can help increase free fatty acid breakdown and potentially utilization for energy. So increase fat loss. 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram per day, starting off at 3 milligrams per kilogram just to see how it affects you, and take it about 30 to 45 minutes before your workout or early morning. If you're going to drink it black with as little as carbohydrates in it. There are responders and non-responders, so just see where you fall into this. And anytime you take food in with your coffee, you're reducing the availability of that caffeine. So you may want to consider drinking your coffee alone so you get the greatest effect of that caffeine later. EGCG in green tea, it is a central nervous stimulant as well. It can also increase resting energy expenditure. It can also help alleviate stress by improving the mood, regulating your body temperature, and it does have antioxidant and anti-carcinogenic properties, which is just great for overall health. Approximately 750 milligrams per day, broken up into 270 milligram doses 3 times a day, which is the standardized amount in a lot of research for EGCG. But know your limitations for green tea. We shouldn't be consuming gallons of it each day because there is potential for decreased iron absorption. And some of the green teas do have a good amount of caffeine in them as well. So that just may be exogenous caffeine that we don't know that we're consuming, which could lead to irritability as well. And protein. Consuming, again, 50 to 175% more than the general population. So about 1.2 to 1.7 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight for optimal muscle growth and performance. These should be complete proteins as well. But be aware of the increased protein and excess calories. If we increase protein, we're increasing calories. So that just may mean you have to make modifications to your carbohydrates and fats to accommodate a higher protein level, because protein has the greatest thermic effect of food. It requires more energy to break it down, which means more energy to break it down means more calorie usage to break down protein. It creates a sense of satiety, so we create a sense of fullness, so we don't eat nearly as much because we're full, because it takes longer for protein to get broken down, which may stave off hunger and take longer. Look for high-quality proteins, ones that are complete with all 9 essential amino acids and the branched chain amino acids, leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And those choices are meats, dairies, eggs, fish, legumes, and soy. And you can make complete proteins through the combinations of vegetable and plant-based proteins, and which we strongly recommend for vegetarians, vegans, and other non-meat eating people. So that's about it for today. Thank you for attending this talk. I hope I helped answer some of your questions and just gave you some insight as to 3 very simple ergogenic aids that we all may be consuming now, or maybe you're not consuming enough of, and you may want to dabble into seeing how you can better approach it into your diet. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to email me or contact me through Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. You can find me at designedathlete@gmail.com or at designedathlete on my Twitter account. I do help people with any questions that they have. Again, we're very pleased here at BodyTrack to offer these to you every month, and we hope that next time we do this, you're able to take in more information and apply it to your workout regimens and opportunities for you to see the greatest optimal performance you can do. So again, thank you very much for this time, and hope to see you guys all next month. Enjoy your evening. Good night.